past.
Hi,
You
nice
know
to meet you.
her?
Hamza.
You know
You nice to meet
Nicholas?
you.
Nice to was in
Right.
your role working with
Exactly.
her in 1908, was
Yeah,
it?
in Argentina.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And he was exhausted.
it
Remember, it was such fun.
was fun. It was
We
really
used to have such lovely dinners together.
exactly.
Always. I'm fine, and you? How's
Well,
retirement?
very good.
It is. Where are you now? Have you gone back
I'm in
home?
Sofia. Yeah,
In
in Sofia
Sofia.
for 3 years.
Already 3 years.
And I'm a UNDP advisor, so
Okay. So you have something to
policy,
be. That's fun. You enjoying that?
yeah,
Okay. Control.
rewarding.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Take care. Bye, Katya. For your event?
Yeah,
All right. Because I think that's what's going to happen. The secretariat probably send their own press. They're on my list too.
yeah.
That's, yeah, that's what's going to happen. Obviously, yeah. And yeah, let's see what happens. And then I've got I'll share them outside. In fact, I should go through and see if there's any other ones I've got there which I can share. But it's looking for a needle in a haystack 'cause
Em vez de eu olhar para cá, o meu olho fica zaroio, como isso. Ó, eu tô olhando para cá. Como que tá aqui?
Não, tá tranquilo. Parece que você tá olhando para a própria tela,
Ah,
mas
tá ótimo.
como se tivesse meio que os palestrantes por aqui. Enfim, tem muita. Quer ver? Ó? Você quer ver? Quer ver?
What?
Football, UEFA. Doesn't say. How are you? I saw you across the room. I said, hi, exactly. Hi.
Still in Geneva?
A neon.
Oh, neon there.
How are you?
I'm fine.
Yeah? What are you up
No.
to? Huh? I said, at least I have to say, at least that. No?
That's nice. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah. It is quite good, but every hour it's okay. And this week.
We make good progress in 3 years.
Yeah.
Figures. That's going now. It's going.
No.
So it's
Well,
been, I left 3 years.
okay. Yeah.
I haven't seen anyone of that news this year, but
Oh,
it's
they
just
hear.
I'm not.
You know, they hear.
They hear, I know, but I'm
whether
just-
they over the other.
Yeah, no, I'm not used
Pavilion
to these
area.
things, cops. I said, okay, I'll just sit down here. I prepare do my thing. I don't have the
Clear out fast.
clear.
It's madness. It's madness.
I don't know. I don't know how you do it.
Hard work for everyone. It's even harder as an observer when you haven't got an office, you haven't got anything.
A lot of people on the floor, so I was I see there, you know. And business
I
as
didn't know
usual.
what's happening. I saw Peter Bronca
Okay.
and I said, "Oh, Peter, I saw you last night." "No, that's just behind you, yeah." He said, "Well, yes, I was with my wife." I said, "No, that wasn't your wife." He said,
Yes.
"Yes, I divorced." His
Yeah.
neck- His
Okay, you made a
neck's
guy.
one.
You made a guy.
There's
That
me
can
telling
happen.
him, "No,
How
it
you
wasn't your
supposed to
wife.
know?
No, it was."
That's the kind of thing you're like, oh.
Oh God, yeah. Anyway, he took it in good stead. I think he
Of
quite
course.
liked. Right, so it was fine. Yeah.
What are you doing with the mic?
No. Oh, in case. Very pleasant. It's she's in the background or little bit, but
I think the mic. Yeah. Your voice is coming to the Teams. That's okay. Okay.
What is this?
Audience? No.
right.
No, no, no. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome. My name is Matthew Phillips, and I'm going to be moderating this event. I lead a project called Groundswell, which is part of Global Optimism. And I have to say, sports is an area that I really take a lot of optimism from, particularly as we go into the heart of this climate negotiations here in Baku. This event is for Sports for Climate Action, the framework that has come out of UN climate change. And the event, as you can see, is called Playing to Win Against Climate Change. Almost 300 organizations, leagues, teams, and clubs have joined the Sports for Climate Action framework, committing to a net zero, resilient future by 2040. It is phenomenal how quickly it's come together. In this session, we're going to dive into the potential for systems transformations through the unique spheres of influence that sports holds. This is from the signatories to the Sports for Climate Action framework itself, and we'll see that in the first session, the first panel. It's through policy and advocacy work, and we're going to see that very much in the second panel. And finally, we're going to turn to the athletes themselves, the voices, the people that can really inspire and evoke fan engagement on this issue. We know that the power of sport is undeniable. 70% of fans all over the world say that they would engage on this issue if their team helped them to do so. And we're going to hear from some incredible, inspiring stories on that front. But to kick us off, to set the scene, to clear the pitch, I'd like to welcome to the stage Lindita Shafari Salihu, who is the initiatives lead at UN Climate Change. Lindita.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think people who are especially in this conference know by now that to solve climate crisis, we need a whole of society approach. And what sport does is really, it provides us with that connective tissues that unite us across cultures and countries and borders. That is why in the UN climate change, we have decided to work with sports, to be inspired by them, but also to collectively see where and how we can play to win on the race against climate change. So you may wonder, what can sport do to address climate change? In the Sports for Climate Action and in consultation with our signatories, we come to understand that there is an environmental impact that is caused by extensive infrastructure, by transport, by things that are bought, and by services that exist in the industry as well. So we're trying to address those, and you will hear from our signatories specifically how they're taking action in this regard. But beyond that, we also believe that there's value chain impact as well that sports can work together to address. This is really by influencing private sector from whom they buy services and goods so that they too become part of the transition. At the same time, we believe that having these conversations with the value chain partners can lead to very important solutions as well that work for everyone. In Sports for Climate Action, we're looking at the spheres of influence. How can sport work with fans to address transport emissions, but at the same time to really see what kind of solutions can they collectively build in the cities where they operate, in the cities that they go as visitors as well. We're looking at what sports can do to work with city administrators, but at the same time with communities that live and operate in those cities. There's a lot to unpack there in terms of coming together in a spirit of solidarity and in a spirit of peace to come together and solve these issues. Certainly, we also believe that there is a role to play for sports in policy as well, to come up with policy solutions and support the governments and give them the credibility that if the right policies are put in place, there will be a demand and there will be sport waiting to implement those as well. We do know that sport sports has a substantive role to play in bringing the conversation on climate action in the living rooms. And some of these discussions we're having with our signatories, both on mitigation and on adaptation, and we've also included the concept of climate solidarity. You can do what you can at home, but at the same time, there surely are solutions that you can provide and help you can provide to the others who may not be in as fortunate situation. So to unpack all of these issues, I'm delighted to welcome everyone to today's event, and I'm handing it over back to Matthew. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lindita. This is all about the living rooms conversation, how we can get across to fans, but also about how organizations can reduce their own impact on the planet that we live in. So to really set the scene in our first session, where we're going to be having a discussion with Sports for Climate Action signatories, I'd like to welcome a GB sporting legend, a cyclist and Olympian, who is now the chair of Sport England, Chris Boardman, to set the frame for this discussion. Chris, welcome, and over to you.
Thank you, and thanks, Lindita. Yeah, you just alluded to my my athletic past. I know you're probably finding that quite hard to believe, but I have the photographs to prove that it's true, albeit they are in black and white. But my sport, as you alluded to, was sportive cycling, and I found after retirement that it's also a pretty amazing form of transport as well. And I became quite passionate about that. I campaigned for it, I promoted it, and now I work for one of the governmental departments in the UK, Department for Transport, overseeing about £3 billion worth of investment to make it a viable part of a sustainable transport solution. I'm also chairman of Sport England, who is the body of the Department for Culture, Media and Sport, that oversees up to £300 million worth of spend every year to simply get more people active. So tomorrow I'm going to be talking about transport. Today it's all about sport. And we know that climate change, it's already affecting sport, and sport is already affecting climate change. Climate change, it's like petrol on a fire, really, isn't it? It takes existing crises and just makes them worse. We now estimate we're losing 120,000 grassroots football games every year to flooding. The ski industry in Scotland is dwindling, getting smaller and smaller because the snow is less reliable and less frequent. We have water that's too dirty to swim in due to overwhelmed waste systems that are very topical at the moment. And the Olympics this year, when I was there, it was touch and go whether the triathlon took place because of pollution in the River Seine, despite 1.4 billion euros being spent to try and contain it. Meanwhile, sport's own carbon footprint and contribution to waste is massive. The Rio Olympics produced more carbon than 26 countries in 2016. Football, it has to be said, is expanding competition and flying to ever more fixtures around the world. And I know none of the required changes are easy, but climate change doesn't care. We are the first generation to understand this problem, and we are the last generation to have the opportunity to prevent it. And that's quite a responsibility. A former UK Prime Minister, Tony Blair, once said that sport is often the best anti-crime policy, the best public health policy, and the best way to bring people together. I think he missed one. Sport is one of our best climate change policies too, or it could be. And I think there's three key elements to make that work. The first is we have reach. In England alone, there are over 75,000 sports clubs powered by 10 million volunteers. We are embedded in every community in the country, and it's a similar picture across the world. If this becomes their cause as well, if fans and participants start using sustainable transport wherever they can, stop using single-use plastics, switch en masse to clean energy, proactively start nurturing biodiversity at their thousands of pitches, not only will that have a significant impact because of that scale, that behavior will permeate out into those clubs, into communities, and become a new culture. The second one is we are emotionally unifying. Sport has a power like absolutely no other to win hearts and minds. We surveyed some UK children earlier this year, and we found that 65% of them wanted to see sports stars leading and speaking out for their future on climate change. Icons like Harry Kane, Marcus Rashford, and Emma Raducanu. We've seen in recent global politics just how much more important emotional connection is than dry policy alone, or that emotional drive can help drive the policy itself. And the third one is we can regulate. A lot of what I've just been talking about is optional. We've been relying and still rely very heavily on voluntary action. And it's not getting us there fast enough. That's just a reality. To do this effectively, we have to conquer what's known as the status quo bias effect. We are drawn to what we know, even if it's not great, for fear. Fear of loss is 5 times stronger than with the draw that pulls us towards possible better things in the future. We instinctively fear the unknown. We fear change. To make the move from informing and encouraging to enabling and requiring, my organisation that I mentioned at the start, Sport England, is launching a new approach to tackle this status quo bias with a behavioural science model for sustainability, and we expect to publish that in the next year. And it's called EPIC, because everybody likes an acronym. Education is the first one. How do we actually do it? How do our people need to do it? It's our responsibility to provide training, tools for everything from measuring and reducing emissions to protecting nature. The second is persuasion. Public advocacy and campaigns like our Going for Green pledge. I rode with a group this year from Manchester to Paris, and we got organisations, about 250, I think, in the end, to sign a pledge en route to commit to taking action. So shining a light on the good, and also get a spotlight on what's not so good. Make that status quo a little bit uncomfortable. Under incentives, this year we launched our Every Move strategy. We've committed to invest 100 million into decarbonising the sporting sector. Sports clubs across the country can bid for money to become energy efficient. And the last one, conditionality. We'll help you. We'll do everything we can. We'll fund, we'll train, but it's no longer optional. From 2027, we won't use public money to fund any major organisation that doesn't have a viable sustainability plan. It's a first of a kind package to try and bridge that gap between voluntary and having a conditional approach to how we fund things. And I think it's really important to note that when I put something in the newspaper last year, there was a collective, oh, thank God, from the industry. And it wasn't the response that everybody was expecting. People feel really uncomfortable, and in this area, they want leadership. Nelson Mandela famously suggested that sport has the power to change the world. And whilst I agree with him, I think I'd like to add a caveat. Sport has the power to change the world if the sector intentionally organises itself to do so. Changing the world doesn't just happen. With an estimated 3 billion fans worldwide, our influence is absolutely huge. So let's use it. If we have a platform, like no other to speak on climate issues to a global audience. So let's speak. So let's get organised, lift our ambition, and let's lead. Thank you.
Hello. All right. Thank you so much, Chris. We're going to get into it now, but before we do that, I'd like to invite to this kind of sofa set up here our fantastic panelists. So we have Sarah Mariana of the FIA. Please make your way up here. We have Filippo Veglio of UEFA. We have Rafael Pastor of Real Betis, and we also have Rishi Jain of Liverpool FC. Fantastic, thank you. So I was struck by what Chris just said about sport being an emotionally unifying opportunity for fans, and also the fact that we have an enormous platform through Sports for Climate Action to speak about this issue, and I think to engage on climate on an entirely new dimension, perhaps to what we see in the dry policy landscape that Chris talked about. You all represent amazing organizations within Sports for Climate Action. So I'd like to kind of start by thinking about the power of that. And maybe, Mariana, I can begin with you and the FIA. Obviously, you represent so many motoring organizations, including Formula One, Formula E. You know, motorsports can be a catalyst for change. So could you maybe describe your own journey as part of the FIA and how that's actually kind of led to system transformations elsewhere?
Sure, thank you. So I joined the FIA actually 1 year ago. So my experience has been fairly recent, but I've seen really an acceleration in what we do. So the sustainability strategy that we have dates back to 2020, and now we are reviewing it to integrate even more aspects such as biodiversity that was touched upon, for example, by Chris. So you mentioned F1 and Formula E. They are probably the pinnacle in their respective sports when it comes to racing. But actually, what the span and depth of our strategy looks, first of all, of ourselves as an organization, because we need to have our house in order to be able to be credible in this space and being credible as the governing body of motorsports. Our 243 clubs also rely on our guidance when it comes to indicating the path to more sustainable innovation. And for example, we have expanded our sustainability accreditation program. That's an environmental accreditation that helps clubs, promoters, organizers, and teams to set targets and really measure and reduce their impact. And this has been very successful. We had over 100 accreditations since 2021, since when our president came into office. And all 10 Formula One and all 11 Formula E teams have reached the highest level of this accreditation, the 3-star accreditation. It's a management system approach that leads up to those 3 stars. So these clubs once again showed leadership even in this regard. And now we are looking into biodiversity, into more focused research around different types of power for our cars, and then we'll see how it leads.
Thank you. It's good to see how like healthy competition can actually lead to other orders of climate excellence. And obviously we need the cooperation alongside that, but so inspiring to hear about what you're doing, particularly with those organizations that you mentioned. Felipe, I'd love to turn to you. I'm conscious that, you know, UEFA has doing some extraordinary things. I think back in July this year, you announced a climate fund for like sports clubs, and that's kind of gone to more kind of regionalized, localized efforts within Germany. I'm curious to know how that climate fund maybe can go much more global or beyond Germany itself. It'd be great to hear from you on that front.
Thank you, Matthew. Good afternoon, everybody. Yes, so UEFA, the governing body of European football, and really driving through strategic actions on the back of a decision to really invest with a strategic mindset for this decade. So we're looking at 2021 to 2030 with short, medium, and long-term investments and short, medium, and long-term regulations that we are kicking in. That includes also the area of UEFA events. You may have followed, for those who are football fans, you may have followed the Euro 2024 tournament in Germany. And there, as with every event, the question comes up, what is the climate responsibility that we take with regard to unavoidable emissions? I think we have to be honest, every event does generate emissions. A sport event, an event of this nature today here in Baku, but every sort of event. So what do we do with the unavoidable emissions? What do we do on the back of a strong measurement and forecast that we set in place a couple of years ahead of the tournament? What do we do on the back of a strong investment to reduce emissions? And what do we do then with the unavoidable ones? The question here was, how do we make sure that Euro, which really brings first of all, billions of viewers, brings a lot of revenue generated, brings a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of awareness about sport. How do we make sure that that climate responsibility translates into action locally? And when we mean locally, we mean at the bottom of the football pyramid. UEFA, the Euro is, if you will, at the pinnacle of men's teams competition, but the base of the economic and football pyramid lies really in amateur clubs. So we said, let's look at the emissions, let's attribute a price to them, and let's build together with that fund totaling 7 million, let's build a competition for clubs to apply, amateur clubs across all of Germany to apply freely to make the investments they are looking for in the areas of water, in the area of energy, in the area of mobility, and in the area of waste management. We had over 5,000 clubs replying on a relatively modest marketing campaign that we did because we were still feeling our way around. So that shows you the interest there was. We translated that into over 200 specific projects looking at that 7 million and spread across the 4 areas that I outlined. We're looking at over 200 projects there specifically that really generated the local investments and therefore the local impact that we were looking for. Football, like every other sport, is undergoing a transformation, needs to undergo transformations also at the level of the infrastructure. And this is how we translated a large, very visible event, a very local event as well, all across Germany, with millions of people active as fans, but also active as spectators, as ticket holders, into then the investments cascading into that football pyramid. There's a lot more detail on the web. We have published all of the results on the back of that investment to show how you can look away from the traditional, let's say, offsetting model into that investment model through that climate fund.
Thank you, Filippo. Really, really inspiring. Now, Raphael, I think Real Betis might have been like one of the first signatories of the Sports for Climate Action Framework, and you've, I feel, been doing this work for a long time, and you were one of the first signatories to Climate Neutral Now as well, around unavoidable emissions. So I'm just curious for you to take us on the longer journey, perhaps, that Real Betis has been on, and the success that you've seen as a result of that.
Well, for us, one of the first big steps was exactly that, joining Climate Neutral Now and then Sport for Climate Action. For us, having allies as them who know much more better than we did about climate challenge that we all have was absolutely crucial. Without these alliances, it would be impossible. 4 years ago, when we started Forever Green program, we didn't know a clue about what was about this global challenge that we have. So having this alliance, or the one we signed 2 days ago in here in this same room with other 10 clubs and with Sport for Climate Action, this collaboration for us is it's the base of everything. And with modesty and with all our commitment in every level of the club, from the bottom and from every employee and from the board of directors, it has created a culture in the club after these 4 years in which we are really committed. And for us, this path is something that we should do all together, also including our fans. Our fans are the base also for everything. Without fans, for us, fans is the first thing. Even if they are more worried about the sportive performance, we have to involve them as much as we can, and we are trying to do that with a strong effort in terms of communication. That it's also crucial. We have amazing assets to do so, because we have, of course, players who are role models for everyone, but also they have a very strong influence. And at the same time, we are focusing a lot in creativity, in the talent that all the team that we have in the club for communication and also for marketing is put at the service of also this crucial challenge that we have. And with that, we can arise over all the information that society has and that sports sector has trying to disseminate this crucial effort that we all have to face, and in which we all have to put the best of us. And another thing that is crucial is to do things. We need to do things. We cannot have what we say paralysis because of the analysis. We need to start doing things, maybe small, maybe bigger. We have also the Forever Green Match, which is like the big party of environment and our commitment and all our fans. And thanks to that, little by little, we have more and more involvement by our fans.
Yeah, I think it's amazing what you've been doing, and I think not to be in a situation where you're proselytizing and preaching to fans, but rather engaging them in the dialogue and in the actions that they want to see is a much better form of engagement. It's fantastic. Rishi, you've also been thinking a lot about this. Sorry, we're gonna have to share microphones, I'm afraid. And I mean, Liverpool, probably one of the most emblematic global football clubs in the world, and I think
Probably. More than probably.
you would say, okay, well, I'd love to get your perspective, but there could be some competition in the room for who that should be, including from Real Betis. But I know that you've come out with a sustainability strategy called the Red Way, and that's been hugely successful. It would be great if you could maybe just give us all a bit of an impression about what that was about and how it came about.
Of course. So the Red Way is our commitment to build a better future for our people, our planet, and our communities. It's our ESG program. Back in 2021, so similar timelines to Rafa and colleagues at Betis, we had a multitude of different programs around different pillars, ED&I, community, really light touch sustainability work. But the Red Way was born to basically bring all those together. And that's where we as a club really took hold of sustainability and said we need to do more in the space. We need to create an identity which people can resonate with, both internally and externally. So in 2021, the Red Way was born. It was part of the ISO 20021 accreditation process that we went through with the first club to achieve that. And then it's also where we delivered and developed a 25-point strategy across 3 pillars: people, planet, communities. People is where we talk about everything we do around diversity and inclusion. So how does Liverpool Football Club continue and aspire to be a workforce that is representative of the communities that we serve? You can't put a value on that. Obviously, you can measure it through metrics, but it's incredibly important that people who engage with our football club, whether they're supporters, people who want to purchase products from us, people who work in our community programs, see people who think like them, look like them, they can relate to, because that's really important anyway. And that's also where we talk a lot around the benchmarks and the accreditations that we work towards, as well as the ISO and other pieces of work. From a planet side of things is where we have targets around 2030, 2040, which are obviously aligned with Sports for Climate Action. It's where we do a lot of work. I spoke on this stage a couple of days ago around our biodiversity efforts and what we do there and how we really take on our responsibility to minimise the impact that we have on the environment. As colleagues have said already on this panel, there are always going to be some level of impact that we have, particularly in the sports space, but in any society, any part of society. But it's about acknowledging that through data and also actively reducing those. And then finally, the communities pillar is a mix. It's a mix of the incredible work of LFC Foundation, which is the club's official charity. They have targets to work with 150,000 young people on a yearly basis. And when we say work with, it's building long-term relationships with these people and their families. It's not a one-off, see you once, see you later. We want to see these people 20, 30, 40, 50 times a year and develop them as individuals. And then also how we work with our commercial partners. So we have 25 commercial partners, 8 of which are based in the US. And actually we work with our commercial partners to enhance the work that we're doing. So we recognize that some of our challenges are similar to theirs and vice versa, but we also know that we can find the solution together. So we actually work with brands who aren't necessarily focused on sports and gains, but obviously operate in the sports space and say to them, what are you doing in this space? We're doing this, can we work together? And actually the influence that we have alongside those is something that we're really proud of. But all in all, the Red Way is our all-encompassing sustainability program. It sits at the very top of our strategy from a club perspective, sits at the very top in terms of responsibility from a board side as well. And it's something we're very much bought into as a football club and something we're very proud of.
It's amazing. And thank you also, Rishi, for bringing in near-term targets to around 2030 that align with the Paris Agreement and also biodiversity. This is not one issue, but it links obviously to desertification, biodiversity, and the whole panoply of like how our global systems operate. I want to sort of tap a little bit more deeper into what you were describing around people and also what we were talking about in terms of fans and Forever Green, and really talk about that level of like inspiring the people that love sport as the athletes do, as indeed all of us do. And actually, Mariana, maybe I could just turn to you in the first instance to ask you, how do you think about people when it comes to motorsports and how that impacts their everyday lives actually?
Thank you. Yes, we know that we have a big stage and huge influence over fans and audiences. So I think it's just right that we use that, we leverage that to try to make a difference and also inspire our other organizations to do the same. So when it comes to fans, there is the passion, and then there is also the behind the scenes that we are trying to do. So we try to engagement at two levels. So we are trying to make their life easier when it comes to act sustainably as well when they come to our events. For example, we are currently work with MIT Sensible City Labs to look at all the mobility around the sporting events with regard, especially now the case studies around United States Grand Prix, to understand how we can help effectively manage those events in a more efficient and therefore sustainable way. The fans maybe will not see that immediately. They will see the recommendations that we will bring forward that could help other organizers of big events streamline the mobility and help the fans travel around when they go to those events in a more sustainable way. Also, we are working on the ground with organizers, promoters, all the local suppliers to make sure that everything is on site, from catering to water sources, energy sources, and waste, is aligning with minimum, at least, environmental standards to send them a consistent message throughout the events that fans can recognize and align to. I was just a couple of weeks ago in Bahrain for the final of the World Endurance Championship, and I went to see their massive solar panel plants that powers almost the whole stadium, the water stations. We try to replicate at least some of them in all the different locations so fans can see a consistent message, recognize and engage with that.
Thank you so much. It's just great kind of having the whole system spelled out as you've just done it. And Felipe, I'm just noticing that UEFA has some pretty massive tournaments coming up indeed next year with the Women's Euros. I wonder if you could talk about how you're really using that as an opportunity to engage fans on another level.
Yes, I think building on what Sarah was saying before, fans are the lifeblood of every sport, and even more so perhaps of football, the ultimate passion in many, many parts of the world. Therefore, also significant volumes of fans interested in their respective teams and therefore interested in travel. As we well know, in these circles, we talk a lot about what is under control and what is under influence. We try as much as possible, also through the use and the constant refinement of our digital interface with fans, to direct fans to public transport options. Just to give you a data point, over 81% of fans of ticket holders, that went to Euro 24 games used public transport. We can track that, we can measure that, and importantly, we can also report back on it and learn from what has worked and what has not worked. That was on the back of significant investments made in public transport offers, in public transport solutions that are viable, that are sustainable, but that also get fans from A to B and quickly out of wherever they need to go. We're trying to replicate that for the case of Switzerland. We announced our ESG strategy dedicated to Women's Euro, which takes place next July all across Switzerland, across a wide variety of host cities, across a wide variety of cultures in a multicultural country like Switzerland. And also there, transport is at the heart of that strategy with free public transport for ticket holders. So also there to think through, and for those who live or know Switzerland, you know how expensive that can be in terms of a decision to go or not by public transport. So also there, a massive investment in facilitating the access, not only to the ticket, but on the back of the ticket to a sustainable transport solution. We hope to hit as high numbers as we did in Germany, but again, to continue to refine that model, to work together with the local authorities, but also make the necessary investments to continue to drive decisions towards that sustainable mobility.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And Raphael, you talked a little bit about Forever Green already. I think you've so far tallied in actions these are, how do they connect with fans and all the rest of it? Maybe just picking a couple of choice examples.
Sure. One of the key points for us to connect with fans, it's make them part of the solution, to make them part of the movement. And we know that also they are part of the impact that we have. So, for example, we may mention waste management around an event. We try to make them aware that they have a responsibility in terms of the waste that a game, that a match produce. But it is also crucial not to blame them. It's to focus very much in the positive message. And at some point for us, these 200 actions that we have performed, for us, beside this dissemination, the communication that we mentioned before is very important. But at some point, for them, it makes sense that a club that like Real Betis, which is not one of the biggest in Spain, but so many people in Spain, they it's like their second team, and it's a club that is liked in general terms. And I think it's because of certain values that we have, since we have suffered a lot during our history, even we have been in the third division for a while. The loyalty is something really present in what we do in all our performance. So there is a kind of connection with that and with values and with community and with social impact that we have, that at some point, even at the beginning, they were not so clear. Maybe Forever Green, this is a sponsor or what is this? But finally, little by little, they know about it. And for them, it makes sense. It makes sense. Okay, my club is doing this. I'm proud of it. I like it. It's something that I have to take as reference for me to do it in our day by day. And well, I think this is really important with this connection and of course mobility. We know that we move a lot of people around our events, and we have alliances with that from the public transport and the public government, the local government, till some collaborators as who promotes and who has products and services in a sustainable way. I'm super happy now because finally, after a lot of difficulties, we have our own bike parking right close to the stadium, and yeah, it's happening. And when I reach the stadium and there are so many bikes parked there, for me it's a really good point, and we need to increase the capacity of that parking hopefully in the future.
Thank you, Rafa. And it's just amazing to think about how one can tap into the loyalty and pride that people feel for the clubs that they're a part of. I think that is such a powerful human emotion. Rishi, I just wonder if I can maybe ask you finally, actually, around Liverpool fans. Like, what have you learned through the Red Way about what Liverpool fans maybe want and how they really engage meaningfully in this issue?
So I'd say one of the real gifts that we have as Liverpool Football Club is the ability to storytell. We recognize that if we can tell a story about a topic and tell it authentically and with transparency, that will resonate with our supporters. So the best example I can give you is World Earth Day early this year. It was also the day that we decided to launch our Red Way report. And for those of you who haven't seen the report, please take a look. It's openly available. 35 pages of written, detailed updates against each of our KPIs, some of which track in exactly the way you'd want them to, some not so much. So transparency is incredibly important to us. But we did have the challenge of how do we make this land with our supporters? We know that a sustainability report probably speaks to the majority of the people in this room, but For your everyday fan, that may not be the case. So we decided to have a bit of fun with it. So at 9 a.m. on the day, we launched a report. We send it to our sustainability contacts, our stakeholders, journalists, etc., and we let it breathe. At 10 a.m., and obviously we'd filmed this content before, we launched a piece of content with 6 of our men's first team, and it was based on the theme of the US Office. Anyone who's seen the US Office, I'm a big fan myself. And what we did, we tasked the players with the inverted commas challenge of coming up with the club's plans for World Earth Day. So what the content did was it brought out the personalities of the players, because that's what fans want to see. They want to see players as humans. They want to feel like they know them personally, and that's exactly what we did. So we had Andy Robertson, who is Scotland captain, left back, one of our most successful players. He took on the Michael Scott role and was bossing everyone around, telling them what to do, but didn't really have an idea about what was going on. You had Darwin Núñez, the Uruguayan striker, real sort of star of the team. He spoke solely in his native language, so no one had any idea what he was saying. And then we just played into this. It's nice of Ibrahima Konate, French centre-back, really loved member of the team. He's a naturally funny person. So actually, to get Ibu to say the word sustainability in English is not his first language, he stumbled over that a lot. And actually, that makes great content because people love that because they see him as real. But I suppose that the pinnacle of that piece of content was actually landing all these messages, educating our supporters. But actually, one of the best parts is we spoke to Mo Salah, and obviously it's Mo Salah, he's unbelievable. Mo speaks and the world listens. And we said to Mo, do you want to be involved? And he's like, yeah, I'll do it. Like, great. That's going to be amazing. It's going to land. It's Mo. And he said, Mo, we've got one more question for you. And he goes, what? And he goes, how do you feel about being James Bond? And who doesn't want to be James Bond? Let's be honest. So Mo straight away was like, yes, I'll be James Bond. Didn't even know what we were asking him to do. He comes to the training ground in the best tux you've ever seen, obviously. It's Mo Salah, he's going to have nice tux. So we got him to pretend to be James Bond. And there's a scene where he's got a plastic bottle and he pretends to sort of throw it like down the barrel, like the iconic James Bond shot, and land it in the bin. And we use the term license to recycle rather than license to kill. And you know what? We have fun with it. And that's the thing. We can have fun with it, but only because, I'll take you back, we've got the report. Because if you do the piece of content and have loads of fun with it, you're actually making light of what is such an incredibly important topic. And that's wrong, but we felt we could only do that with the substance and the foundation that we had. Within hours of launching this piece of content, fans are clipping it up. It's made it into GIFs, into memes, it's still getting news. And for us, that is success. Because our fans engage with this piece of content. They love it, they consume it, and then they want to understand why we've done it. So actually, from that piece of content itself, we raised awareness of the red ray from 5% to 34% within our fan base. But probably the most important statistic is that over half of the people who engaged with that piece of content weren't Liverpool fans because it landed globally. So we know we have that power, we know we have that responsibility, but as I said, you can only do that with a strong foundation and actually being really transparent in the way that you do things. It's something we're really proud of. Challenge that we have now is, how do we top it? I'll take that challenge on all day long.
Well, no, I'm glad you're taking on the challenge, Rishi. That's amazing. And I think introducing fun into this is actually just such a new kind of dimension to bring into the climate action conversation and making the humans human actually as well. And even when they're stuttering over what they're doing, it sort of allows people to connect. So important. I wanted to say a massive thank you to Sarah, Filippo, Raphael, and indeed to Rishi. So if we could give a big hand to all of the speakers. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you. And we will invite onto the stage our next set of panelists. We're going to talk about systems transformation. We've heard some of that already. So if I can invite Carol Simon of Panama Ministry of Environment. Carol, welcome, and please just grab a seat. And if I could also invite Olivia Wesendorf of the International Transport Forum at the OECD. Welcome, Olivia. And I think we have online Izani Castro at the National Secretary for Sport Excellence at the for Brazil. Do we have Izani online?
Yes, I'm
Oh,
here.
there you are. Hello, welcome. Okay,
Thank
fantastic.
you.
All right. Well, it's so good to have two of you here in person and one of you online, I'm guessing, all the way from Brazil. Now, we know that sports has the power to foster the public imagination. It brings people together in ways that we can't do in other sectors. It creates community, like we've just been hearing about on the first panel, and builds discourse and belief. Obviously, we've now got representatives from governments who've been really involved in policy. And how can we use policy to have like cross-sector collaboration when it comes to sports and climate action? So, Carol, I wonder if I can kind of begin with you. I note that you kicked off a program recently called the Climate Ambassadors campaign, which brings together public figures together with sporting figures from across all aspects of sports. How is this initiative empowering fans and promoting awareness?
Hello, hello everyone. Yes, in Panama we are we have this initiative about ambassadors of climate change. The idea is to connect climate change with other topics that people can feel familiar with. One of them is sports, and the other one is culture. We are working with Hilary Heron. She is a gymnast from Panama. She participated in the Olympic Games in Paris. So we are trying to mix up a little bit the messages about how climate change affect us, and do it through the sports and through the culture. For example, people usually go out to a run. Panama is a tropical country and it's very humid. So years ago, you can go for a walk or a run at 6 in the morning until 11 in the morning. Now you can't do that. It's exhausting. You can have a heat wave punch, and you can get dehydrated very quickly. So people cannot connect that is because of climate change, because oh, maybe something happened to the climate and that's it. But no, the weather is changing, the patterns are changing, so we are connecting that kind of stuff. For example, if you are planning to have a competition, a running competition, and you prepare this huge event of a competition, and you see the weather webcast, and you see everything will be all fine, it's sunshine everywhere, you will have a great weather, and then this tropical storm appears from nowhere. So it's very important to connect that kind of stuff, because then what will happen if you don't have that event? First of all, the runners, that people prepare themselves to be in that contest. The second part, the people that prepare themselves to sell things around that activity. That will be an economic impact, and I got a negative economic impact. So we are trying to use this information to connect with people. So we are using Instagram posts, trying to connect the information. We are also organizing some activities. We want to go to the communities also to connect with them, and also to teach them about climate change and this different way to see the things. And I will also add, like, when we talk with sports, because the previous panel I see like everyone, most of the panelists were about like the football area. Remember, there are all other sports that we can also be in touch with. For example, Hillary, when we were talking with her, we asked her like, how do you feel about the climate? Only like that. And she told us like there was a competition that had to be like canceled for a few days because the weather was not giving, and it was very rainy. It was risky for them. And the thing is that they only was for a few days there. So if you have to change your flights, if you have the money to do that, you do it. But if you don't, and you know that some athletes doesn't have like those kind of support. So we have to think like very deep inside of that. And with these climate ambassadors, we want to go further and present those kinds of moments so people can reflect on that.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Carol. I've actually tried running in Central America and it didn't go so well for me. I think I lasted less than 2 kilometers. So you really experience the changes all the time. I just want to turn to you, Olivia. It's come up a few times today already, and in fact, in Chris's opening remarks around the interconnection between transport and sports, and the fact that we need to reduce emissions, in fact, by how fans travel to stadiums and sporting events. Could you just tell us just why this is so important?
Absolutely. So transport makes up the majority of emissions from sporting events. So for example, the recent Rugby World Cup, 94% of the event's carbon footprint was travel. So to reduce emissions from sporting events, action must be taken to reduce emissions from travel and transport. And what that really means is rail and coaches for intercity travel, and a shift to public transport and active mobility for inner city travel. And there are two elements of travel related to sporting events. So the first is the movement of equipment and teams, and the second is fan travel. I think for the Rugby World Cup, again, I'm based in Paris, so a lot of my examples are kind of Paris-based. They made a rule that any journeys less than 5.5 hours for the teams had to be taken by rail, and that was about 80% of travel, and that had a massive impact. In fact, if that was implemented more broadly, that would be equivalent to taking 1 million cars off the road. So there's a really significant impact to these, and also just proving that it's possible, right? And having this as a use case. And then the second element is of course fan travel, which we've heard a lot about today. And this is obviously hard because it's scope 3 emissions. I really liked what Filippo was saying about the Euro 2024 in Germany. And I think this was a really good example of the power of partnerships. And one of the key actions that should be taken is the integration of ticketing and tickets that can be forged through partnerships with local transport agencies. And that can have a really, big impact on just proving the case for, when a fan is able to get a free ticket for transport in a city centre, they can really see how that can work. And one example is for the Rugby World Cup, 84% of transport in the city centre was done by low carbon modes, and that compared to kind of 39% of the standard French population. So it really shows the use case and how this can really transform how people travel if they can see that it can work in practice. And I also really like what Filippo said about investment and investing in the infrastructure to enable this through sporting events can have a broader impact for the population. So it's better to invest in improving public transport and improving provision of walking and cycling than in carbon offsetting, because the benefits will be reaped for decades to come.
It's amazing the difference can be made. It also really captured my imagination alongside Filippo about what Raphael was saying about the enormous bike shed that you have at Real Betis and this flock of bikes that kind of comes across for every single game. Izani, I'd like to turn to you if you're with us. And I think Izani is a basketball Olympian in her own right, as well as working for the Brazil ministry. Sport and especially football, in fact, is part of the kind of cultural identity and psychology of Brazil. I know this is going to be of huge significance in the lead up to your COP next year. In fact, I think even today there was an announcement of an Earth FC at the G20 summit in Rio, trying to engage 1 million fans in COP by the time we get to Belém next year. But I'm just curious to know, Azani, from your perspective, how perhaps you're going to leverage fans through sport, through football in the COP30 negotiations.
In Brazil, with the experience in hosting international events such as the 214 FIFA Men's World Cup and the 2016 Olympic and Paralympic Games, is well prepared to host the 2027 FIFA Women's World Cup. Existing stadium and transportation infrastructure will be utilized to minimize environmental impacts. Additionally, Brazil plans to adopt sustainable practices such as waste management, the use of renewable energy, in promoting public and sustainable transportation. The World Cup will be a unique opportunity to demonstrate how major events can be organized with a greener and more responsible manner. In 2024, the Ministry of Sports, in partnership with the Institute Sports for the Planet, hosted a lecture on how sports can contribute to climate change adaptation. One of the initiatives presented by the Institute was the National Climate Action Plan for Sports, which aims to integrate sports as a tool for raising awareness and take action on climate change. The Sports for the Planet Institute is a nonprofit civil association dedicated to supporting the sports community and vulnerable populations in dealing with climate extremes, focused on adaptation and resilience. The National Climate Action Plans for Sports is a strategic response proposal to climate change, aiming to mobilize the sports community and expand the role of sports as a tool for education and engagement on climate change challenge, and to reduce the negative impacts of climate change on sports and serve as support for adapting the changes we are already facing. With the support of the Ministry of Sports, the plan was one of the most forward topics to be presented at the G20 Social Summit, an event promoted by Brazil G20's presidency, which took place until November 16 in Rio. The National Climate Action Plan for Sports was presented at a G20 Social Summit event titled Sports and Global Climate Challenge, alongside a newly released report by the Terra Football Club. The Terra Football Club is a campaign aiming at mobilizing millions of football fans in Brazil and around the world in preparing for the COP30. It's led by a coalition of football clubs, community groups, civil society, and youth organizations in Brazil. The report, inspired by international studies, projects how rising temperature and extreme weather events could impact football at both professional and community level. The presentation sought to raise awareness of urgent climate action and connect the passion for football to the importance of environment preservation, setting the stage for COP30 and the involvement of the entire football community. It is worth noting that the event, Sport and Global Climate Challenge, preceded the G20's Leaders Summit, and among the 271 actively promoted by civil society entities at the G20 Social Summit, it stood out as the only one with a sports agenda. The activity aligns with the G20's agenda addressing intersectoral issues such as climate adaptation and the role of sports in building a more resilient and healthy society.
Thank you so much, Azani. It's fascinating. I've also heard from a lot of Brazil colleagues that there's a hope within Brazil that the COP, the climate COP, has something to do with the copper, which is obviously the kind of the regional climate tournament. But hopefully with that, we can do a campaign in there somewhere. Carol, I'd like to just return maybe to you and think about what you're doing with Panama and some of what I guess are like the non-traditional alliances and collaborations that you're forging that is really bringing sports action to the fore. So it would be great to hear from you on that front.
Well, we are in the first stage about this collaboration, and also understanding a little bit how we want to work with it. Because at the end of the day, we also understand that we have to work with the communities. Like sometimes we think that we have to work with this big public figure. And I don't know, David Beckham is the first person it came to my mind. But there are people that work in their communities in these kind of topics. So we can also work with them. Maybe that will be like our second or third stage. You know, when you begin, you have to be with this big impulse, but also to bring up people that you think when you go to social media and you say like, oh, they don't have too much followers, but they have like a niche, and that niche, when that person say we need to support this, maybe the 19% of that niche go with that person. So that's the things about the collaborative area that we have to keep in mind, that yeah, we have to work with public figures that are in the top, but we don't have to put away the people that are in the communities, that they are more involved in their daily basis. So that is the future of the steps of the climate ambassadors. Maybe my boss don't know that, but that's part of my my ideas behind of this. And also to keep working with other style of sports. We start with gymnastics, keep it up with football, basketball, baseball, try to figure out how climate change impacts other types of sports, so people can make that click and come through. And also, I know that I don't speak a lot about the art part. We are working with Olga Sinclair. She is a recognized artist. So also culture bring up the information about climate change. Like you go to the pyramids, for example, and then come a superstorm and that pyramid go for nowhere. So you are going to miss that part of the culture too. So that's the thing that we have to make the click and do and use communication in another way, not like how we are communicating now is not working. That's the thing. It's not working. I am 32 years in the world, and since I'm little, I'm always hearing like we are in fire, we have to do something, and I didn't see things changing.
I completely agree, and we're only going to change how we communicate if we humanize the language, bring humor in, as we were hearing, take out the policy jargon from what we're doing. I really like, Carol, what you're saying about it's not just leveraging those that have the most followers, but those who perhaps have regional and local resonance. Who are the local heroes? How do we get through to them? But Olivia, I just want to maybe just tap a little bit further into this nexus between transport and sport. Like, you must have seen and witnessed some pretty amazing and unusual collaborations. And when I just think of the London Olympics and what that did to my home city and transformed the way everyone going to that ceremony and those events that were part of that, in terms of their own impact. These events have huge opportunity to kind of inspire change amongst people. So it'd be great to hear from you about some of those unusual collaborations.
Yeah, absolutely. So with the Rugby World Cup in France, there was a really fantastic collaboration between the Rugby World Cup and SNCF, the main train operator within France. And that was what really enabled there to be the right routes, the capacity to achieve that goal of 80% of team travel taking place by rail. And then it's the same, when it comes to there's all these different levels. If you've got a tournament, you've got the sport association body, but then you've also got the city, you've got the national government, you've got the, of course, in London for the London Olympics, it's TfL. So there needs to be collaboration between all of these different levels of actor in order to assess what is needed, assess what is needed both from a travel perspective, but also from an investment perspective. And I think what we really saw from the London Olympics was that it enabled a review of the London transport system and how effective it is and where it needed to be bolstered. And through that collaboration, there was able to be the investment. I also lived part of my time in London, and I used to live out east, which is where the Olympic Stadium is, and that was a huge regeneration project, which included transport, and the benefits from that are still being seen today for the population. So it's really that opportunity for a country to reflect on its transport offering and then to partner across all levels of actor to really consider how it can be bolstered to deliver transport, but also decarbonized transport.
Amazing. Thanks, Olivia. Thanks, Carolyn. Thanks, Izani. I think that's all we've got time for, but thank you so much for speaking with us today. It's been great to have you. Big hand. Thank you. Okay, we're moving into our final part of the session, and this is really going to be all about the athletes, those who are on the pitches, those who are really experiencing the most egregious impacts of climate change, but also how they can connect with fans directly. To really kind of give us a sense of this, I would like to introduce, to give us a keynote, a kind of triathlete legend in India, and you've come all the way from India to be with us today. I believe you're one of the most decorated athletes in Indian history. So I'd like to welcome to the stage Pragnya Mohan. Perhaps you can come up to the lectern here. Thank you so much for being with us.
Good afternoon, delegates, fellow athletes, and esteemed guests. It's a privilege to be standing here before you at COP29. I'm a triathlete from India who has seen firsthand the impacts of climate change that is transforming our world. After representing India for almost a decade, I'm finding it difficult to train there due to severe climate impacts we are witnessing. With the support of International Olympic Committee, I have been taking climate action locally in India with my project called Ek Beti Ek Cycle, meaning one daughter, one cycle, where we provide rural school girls with reused bicycles to give them a climate-friendly way of transportation to get to schools. But I'm here today because our climate actions must go beyond the local. We must unite in a global action to effect the change we urgently need. As athletes, we are used to facing tough conditions, but climate change is presenting us with an unprecedented challenge. Rising temperatures, erratic weather patterns, poor air quality, polluted waters. These are not just random news stories anymore. They are realities we face in our everyday, in our bodies, our training, and our competitions. And if it is affecting athletes, it is affecting all of us. Extreme heat wave raises temperatures beyond 50 degrees Celsius in summer. Training in these conditions is just not difficult. It is dangerous. The air pollution in many cities is so severe that even a simple run outdoors makes you feel that you have smoked multiple cigarettes. Our rivers, lakes, and oceans, lifelines of our communities, are becoming toxic, filled with plastic waste, industrial runoffs, and pesticides. This crisis has grown beyond what any athlete or an individual can overcome alone. When I train, running through the cities, swimming in open waters, cycling on dusty roads. I feel the pulse of Mother Earth. That pulse has become erratic, unpredictable, and at times frightening. Climate change is pushing us as athletes and as global citizens to our limits. And what I share today is just not an athlete problem. This is a glimpse of the climate crisis we all face. Today, COP29 gives us an unparalleled opportunity to act. Together, we can bring change that protects not just athletes, but every person on this planet. Athletes know that victory demands collaboration, vision, and relentless commitment. That's what climate change calls for, a global, coordinated effort to preserve a livable world for the future. Here at COP29, as sports, let us come together as a global team. The sports world has its own clear and strengthening pathway to action in the Sports for Climate Action Framework, working to reduce emissions, cut waste, and protect ecosystem. Now is the time to take this further. Let's be clear. We know that fossil fuels are the leading contributors to climate change. We know they account for nearly 80% of the global greenhouse gas emissions. Fossil fuel companies are the dopers of the climate arena. It's time for us to enable sports to leave fossil fuel sponsorships behind, to seek alternative partners that truly align with a clean future for all of us. The legacy we leave must transcend the sports we compete in. Together, we must take actions that endure beyond our lifetimes, that make the world safer, cleaner, and more vibrant for every young athlete coming after us. We can create a future where a young athlete in India or anywhere in the world can swim, cycle, or run under clear skies and in safe waters. A world full of life, a world worth striving for. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Pagni, and please take a seat. I think that really sets us up for what the final and next session is all going to be about, how climate change is already impacting the sports that we play. And as you say, it's not just an athlete's problem, it's a people problem. But the way that what's happening to athletes can reverberate throughout communities in the world is, I think, what's so important. To join us and join Pragnya and I on stage, I would like to welcome some in-person and virtual speakers. So to begin, can I welcome David Rudisha to the stage, athletic Kenyan legend and two-time Olympic champion. Welcome, David. And I'd also like to welcome Katie Rood, who is also with us in person, New Zealand footballer, and I believe you play for Hearts at the moment, Katie. Welcome. And I think that online we have Aroni Leilua, who is a Samoan sailor, and I believe also an Olympian and the first sailor for Samoa kind of competing in the Olympics ever. And we also have Sophie Pedersen, a footballer with Denmark and Inter Milan. I believe you have nearly 90 caps for Denmark. And then we have also Sam Matisse, discus for the USA and two-time Olympic champion. Welcome and thank you so much for being here. So yes, we've got Olympians from across 5 continents, and clearly climate change is affecting us everywhere, as Pragnya you've already described. I'd like to maybe just begin on that note and to go around maybe the different ways in which climate change is impacting the sports that we love. So David, please maybe you could tell us a little bit about how climate change is affecting your sport. David.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, climate change is real. And, you know, as athletes, first of all, I must say that we have a very strong connection with our community. And as a Maasai who come from a Maasai community, one of the famous tribe in Kenya that live along with the wild animals, actually in the recent year, we had, frequent droughts that really affected my community. We lost a lot of livestock in which my community depends on their daily activity and for their survival, as well as we lost so many wildlife died, which also affected a lot our tourism sector, which actually employs a lot of the locals in our community. And as I grew up, there is a lot of changes. Over the recent years, I've been growing up seeing some of the rivers around us drying up. And this is causing a huge challenge to our community. And it's also raising a cost because it reaches a point whereby fetching water, you have to go for a long distance. Therefore, people have to incur to cost by drilling boreholes and so forth. So as an athlete, I feel like this climate change is real and it's affecting us because even there is a lot of destruction of forests. And as we all standing here, we also love to see that in the future we have other athletes, champion who are growing up in a healthy and conducive environment and to enable them to perform. But when we see the changes of this climate change, high temperature, you see it's affecting our athletes directly in terms of their training and in their performance. So it's a very concerning matter.
Thank you, David. That's heart-stirring stories, actually, from your sport. And Katie, I wonder if you could just complement that. And how do you feel climate is affecting, I guess, football, particularly in where you've been playing it in New Zealand and in the UK and perhaps elsewhere?
Yeah, well, I guess we heard earlier from Chris as well about 120,000 grassroots games a year getting cancelled. And I think that kind of speaks volumes in itself. And that less football being played, less enjoyment, those team environments where kids really thrive in. I think also just those conditions that you're now forced to go out and train in and play in. And I've had a fair few evenings training in the cold British winter in the best of times, but yeah, those impacts are really challenging for athletes. I think I've been fortunate enough to use football as a kind of vehicle to see the world and lucky enough to go and experience different places and cultures. And definitely there's been a few environments where we're looking to play international football and we can't train because the air quality standard isn't good enough to even go for a casual walk outside. And I guess that also came to life in 2020 when we were preparing for the Tokyo Olympics and we were working on the heat protocol because we knew that it was just going to be too hot to perform how we usually do. So we had to train in heat chambers, doing like high intensity fitness sessions in heat chambers. We had ice vests and slushies ready before the games. Yeah, just heaps of different things where we had to switch it up so that we were able to perform our warm-ups. They're usually up to 45 minutes, but for the Olympics, they were looking at doing 10-minute warm-ups because it was already going to be so hot.
It makes the whole thing sound so unnatural when sporting has actually been something that we've done since time immemorial. So so compelling to hear those examples, Katie, that you've mentioned. I'd like to just turn now to our online speakers. Maybe I could turn to Aroni, Sam, and Sophie. It's great that you're joining us from across the world. Could I just ask what made you think and consider climate change in the first instance? And perhaps, Sophie, I could start with you, if I may.
Yes, thank you very much. Yeah, I think I started being interested and concerned about the climate changes in 2009 when the COP15 was held in Copenhagen. there I think I really started to be concerned about it, to read more about it, and yeah, concerned about this mostly by the fact that we in the rich part of the world are those most responsible for the climate changes, but yet it's affecting the most vulnerable countries the most. I think that's really, really unfair. And from that, I also started like to try to use my own platform as a football player to put focus on this, and try to use the platform to speak to the football world, that we as an industry also need to become more sustainable. I think it's important that we use our platform both to inspire fans. There are 3.5 billion football fans around the world. I think we really have a platform to inspire people, but also it's important that we set an example, and we really try to make this football industry more sustainable.
Thank you for sharing that, Sophie, with us. And similarly, Aroni, I'd love to get your perspective. I mean, clearly, you know, from Samoa, you're going to be really dealing with this firsthand, climate change, but very curious to see and hear how it's affected your sport. So over to you.
Yeah, so I guess my experience of climate change has been predominantly highlighted through what we're seeing in the Pacific and with our brothers and sisters in Tuvalu, as most people are aware of, and I guess them facing the stark reality of potentially losing their motherland to rising sea levels. And that hits quite home. That hits home, especially being, you know, an island so close to us. And the thing about the Pacific is that we don't have high elevation levels. We're pretty close to sea level, with most islands being, you know, between a couple meters to 5 or 15 meters above sea level. So we're not that high off the water level. So we're at more risk of, I guess, coastline erosion. And for a sport like sailing, which I'm from, we're obviously very impacted by the weather, and seeing the different weather patterns we've seen over the last 5 to 10 years has highlighted how bad it is getting. And I guess the more frequent we're seeing these weather patterns occur throughout periods where you'd normally see quite steady wind and weather patterns. So yeah, it's been a real big eye opener to see changes in the Pacific, but also to experience it firsthand through training and competitions. And again, just makes it a lot difficult to plan out your training or your lead into competitions like Tokyo and Paris, when you'd normally expect certain conditions and to be able to prepare for it, and then get hit by a cyclone or extreme heat, or in instances we've had recently, some severe flooding. So yeah, it has proved to become more frequent, and I guess really using our platforms, like what the others have said, to educate people and I guess be the voice for people who don't have the voice is quite important.
Thank you. Yes, exactly. I think Aroni, being a voice for those that don't have a voice. Seen just in the last 5 to 10 years, such a short comparative space of time, and yet the conditions, the environment has changed so much so suddenly. Sam, I'd just like to turn to you finally. Obviously, you're a discus champion. How has this affected track and field, and perhaps any other experiences you've had personally? So, Sam, over to you.
I think, like everybody's been saying, climate change has been affecting every sport. From my vantage in track and field, we've had so many major championships affected by extreme heat. Paris obviously was very hot this year, but not quite as hot as people expected, so we got a little lucky. But last year, our World Championships were in Budapest. It was 35, 40 degrees Celsius, which is kind of unheard of there. For our Olympic trials in 2021, the Pacific Northwest in the US, which is usually pretty cool. Like when I was in college competing there, it would get to maybe 20, 25 Celsius if you were lucky. It got up to 45 for the air temperature, and the track temperature was about 60 degrees Celsius for a couple days, which is just you're trying to make your first, second, whatever Olympic team have a chance of representing your country and fulfilling your dreams. And it's impossible to do that in those conditions. There were athletes who were passing out, fans and officials too. But on top of that, I think it's just the day-to-day training that really takes a toll.
Yeah.
It's hard to prepare for a big competition when you're just being wiped out by 40, 45 degrees in your training. If it's 35, 40 when you're waking up, that's at 7 a.m. You can't wake up that much earlier. And if it's not getting cooler, you can't recover. It's screwing with your sleep. It's messing up your training schedule. And besides extreme heat here, we've been dealing with smoke. There's actually a wildfire about 2.5 miles from where I live last week. And last year we were dealing with a lot of smoke coming down from the Canadian wildfires. So the training day to day is what really takes a toll long term. And then it also just the heat and the extreme conditions are messing up schedules and harming performances at the biggest stages.
Thank you, Sam. I mean, it's just gut wrenching to hear what you have all been through in very different parts of the world over the last few years, and obviously, Pragna, you started us in terms of what your experience in terms of upwards of 50 degrees temperatures. But I want to sort of take a moment to reflect on what all of you have just shared in terms of what you're already experiencing, but now maybe to look ahead. What does climate change mean for the future of your sports, particularly for younger generations that are joining? What are the challenges, and maybe what are the sources of hope for you? So David, could I go to you first?
Yes, actually, climate change poses a serious threat, to the health of the athletes. And you see, of recent competitions, we see that some of the athletes are struggling, and some of them even finishing their competition, collapsing, and so on. And this is something that we need also to safeguard because of the health risk. Their health is at risk. And as you know, that most competitions are held in different cities. Today in athletics, you might be in Asia. The next week, you might be in Europe. The other week, you might be even in North America or South America. And this is very difficult because we need to be united and to speak the same language to see that the athletes are well taken care, because as you well know that there is a lot of effort that is being done in innovation, for example, to improve the performance and training. Therefore, this is also very important that we safeguard our athletes in the environment where they're training in, for us also to be able to see them performing and giving their best. Because I know very well that, in sports, we also work and we have a very connection with our fans. And whenever you are in any championship or any sporting competition, what actually fans expect is how these athletes are going to perform. And it is always very exciting when they do very well in terms of running fast races and even breaking world record. But with this climate change, we might not be seeing that in the future if we cannot tackle this matter as soon as possible.
No, I completely see that. Pragna, perhaps you could also share with us how you think climate change might be impacting the future of, I guess, triathlons and so on.
So I think definitely climate change is impacting triathlon, like we saw at Paris 2024. Triathlon event was delayed by a day because the water pollution was too high in the river, saying to be doing the swimming leg of triathlon. So we can already start to see the impact that climate change is having on sports. And in particular, triathlon is an endurance event, and the entire event is done outdoors and requires athletes to put out like go to their limits to kind of dig in to give a good performance. So I think in the future, if climate change is not addressed and is not tactfully handled, triathlon can cease to exist. Like, you know, that is the kind of problem that we have right now. And it's urgent and it's immediate that we address the topic of climate change and take steps that are corrective and can be measured, and so that sports does not cease to exist in the future. Because in the future, 10 years from now, or even like I can see that triathlon, or for that matter, even marathon or endurance events, might cease to exist.
Thank you for sharing that, Pragnia. So yes, climate change could mean that sports cease to exist. We might no longer be breaking world records. Katie, it would be great if maybe you could share your own experiences. And again, is this bad news, or are there kind of areas of opportunity that you see within football?
I think it's definitely worrisome. I think, as everybody's kind of alluded to, there's a lot of issues and challenges that we need to overcome. And I think those having to endure through that as athletes too, there's a lot of long-term effects that can come from pushing through, as we usually do. But I think what sport shows us too, and you look at the values that we get from sport, probably the biggest one is like teamwork and working together, and how, especially in a team, like you can't do it as individuals. We do all have to come together and play for the win, like you said. And I think, yeah, leaning on what sport brings us, I think people are so captivated by sport because anything can happen. You know, if you're in it, you're there to try and give it your best, to dig as deep as you can, and often even deeper than you ever thought you could. And I think that's kind of the essence of what we need to lean on here, is like, we don't know what's possible until we try. And I think it's great to see that organizations are starting to come together. You got every kind of aspect of sport, from the athletes to the people behind the scenes, starting to come together and like, let's see what's possible. And the only way to do that is by giving it our best shot.
I completely agree, and you don't know what's possible until you come together as a team in a completely new way. So thank you for sharing that, Katie, with us. I'd like to go to our online participants, and at the beginning of this session, Sophie, Sam, and Aroni, Lindita shared with us how the Sports for Climate Action framework that we're all a part of is in the process of updating itself. And I want us to consider that as it does that, what is our duty of care, or what do you feel the duty of care is for clubs and federations, to both athletes and to their fans and to the planet as a whole? So would be really curious to get your perspective. Sophie, perhaps I could begin with you, Sophie.
Yeah, the connection was a bit bad, but I think I got your question. Yeah, I think definitely all sport organizations have to work towards becoming more sustainable. I think this UN action framework for sport is really important. I think it's great for sports organizations to learn from each other, share lessons learned, but also especially when it comes to climate action, that you are part of a team that works towards the same goal. I think it's really important to know that you're not the only one fighting against the climate changes. I really think it's important that we inspire each other and say that we are in this together. So I really urge all sport organizations to join this framework.
Thank you so much, Sophie. Would be great also, Aroni, to hear your perspective. And again, this responsibility that you feel federations and sports organizations has towards their athletes and towards fans.
Yeah, I think the education piece is really important, and I guess ingraining that from the get-go and from the grassroots is where the foundations are laid, and then from there there's a more understanding and a better connection with the common goal. And in terms of the fans and the supporters, that will feed from everyone being on the same page and knowing what that goal looks like, and being part of this framework is a step in the right direction to getting us to where we need to be to see or to prevent the chances of sports like we mentioned before around becoming non-existent again. But yeah, I think the education piece is the key part to making it all work.
Thank you, Aroni. Thank you for sharing that. Sam, it'd be great to also, it's unfair asking you to go last, but I will do it and say if you could share any reflections that you might have. Thank you, Sam.
I think sports are so intertwined with their communities and their fans and their geographies. They really owe it to everybody to do their best to help protect the futures of those fans and their communities, the team or organization itself, and the athletes who are part of it. So, we can talk here as much as we want, but unless, and, advocate, but unless these organizations are pushing ahead with really aggressive sustainability goals, then they're doing a disservice to their sport and organization and ultimately putting their own futures at risk. So I think because of how connected everything is, we definitely need to keep pushing forward on more and more aggressive sustainability goals until we do actually reach net zero and sustainability within sports.
Thanks, Sam. And Sam, if you could just stay with us for one moment, because I want to pivot a little bit and talk about sponsorship in sports. Again, it's something that has come up through the course of our discussion momentarily. And as we all know, sport has an unparalleled influence and popularity, and it's therefore a huge opportunity for organizations to advance their own interests and images. And sports reliance, I would say, on sponsorship and advertising revenues leaves it incredibly vulnerable to greenwashing. We know that fossil fuel companies spend on average $5.6 billion on their images through sports. And I think the largest single spender is Aramco, FIFA's headline sponsor. So this is a deeply contentious issue. And Sam, I just want to ask, when you see the impacts of climate change, such as you've been sharing with us here this afternoon, how does it make you feel to see sports taking so much sponsorship from the fossil fuel industry?
I mean, it's ridiculous. I feel like it's a mixture of just sadness that fans and people who care about sports and the athletes are beholden to these decisions that are most oftentimes out of our hands, and frustration that these decisions keep getting made. And it's not just the greenwashing and trying to spruce up their image, it's the power and connectedness that these companies get from being part of sports and sports sponsorship. And I think sports needs to leave that behind. There's a timer on the fossil fuel industry, we all hope. So if sport really wants to move ahead and make better decisions, then they need to be on the cutting edge of innovation and sustainability and find opportunities outside of fossil fuel sponsorship to grow their revenue. And those opportunities definitely exist. Within athletics, there used to be a pretty large meet in Norway, I believe, called the ExxonMobil Games, but they ditched ExxonMobil about 10 years ago. They're still profitable. They're still one of the biggest track meets in the world. Gazprom used to be a pretty prominent sponsor throughout football clubs in Europe. They got ditched. So it's possible. Sports organizations just need to be a little creative and forward-looking, and it'll benefit everybody, from the fans who will be less angry to the athletes and the organizations themselves as we move forward into a sustainable future.
Thank you so much, Sam, for your candor on that, like, on sharing the frustration, the ridiculousness. And Aroni, I wonder if I can also ask you, maybe, as you're seeing coastal erosion, rising temperatures, sea level rises, where you are in Samoa, how does it make you feel to see this involvement of the fossil fuel industry in sports?
Yeah, similar to Sam, pretty frustrated, to be honest. And I guess even more frustrating to see, big fossil fuel companies align themselves with some of the big sailing teams that we've seen recently compete at the America's Cup. And I guess that's a bit of a slap in the face to the future of the sport and where it could go should things continue the way they go. And again, it just comes down to like what Sam was saying about getting creative and I guess pivoting and finding other options for sponsorship outside of the fossil fuel industry, which are there and do exist. And at the end of the day, you know, we can't be as desperate to I guess attain this funding without thinking about the impacts that's going to have for our future generations and our future livelihoods.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Aroni. And I think we can all agree that sports still can be profitable without being reliant on the fossil fuel industry. This is a habit that can be broken. And what we're seeing is there are a number of actions that are being taken, positive advocacy actions against the involvement of the fossil fuel industry in sports. And in fact, I'd love to hear from Sophie and Katie here today, because they've both been involved in a letter that was sent to FIFA around Aramco's sponsorship. And I believe there was a letter where you complained against the involvement of Aramco in FIFA that was signed by 130 professional athletes from across 26 countries. And it was called Putting a Middle Finger Up to Sport by Aramco. So I wonder, Sophie, could you give us the background to this letter? It would be great to hear what went into it and the kind of action that you saw as a result.
Yeah, with this letter to FIFA, we wanted to protest against this sponsorship deal with Saudi Aramco because, yeah, Saudi Aramco is the biggest oil company in the world, owned by the Saudi state. And we want to send a strong message to FIFA that this does not align with the values of women's football, but also football in general. So that was the reason to send this letter. And of course, we want FIFA to reconsider this partnership with Saudi Aramco and replace Saudi Aramco with sponsors whose values align with the values of football, which is human rights, but also a safe planet for all of us. FIFA shows support for the Paris Agreement and is part of this UN Sport for Climate framework. But we want to tell FIFA that, yeah, those are great values to stand for, but we need to stand up for those values at any time.
Thank you so much, Sophie. It is about standing up for values. And I know that, Katie, you were very involved with Sophie on this effort. So it'd be great to also hear your perspective, if I may ask you for that.
Yeah, I guess we're, again, recognizing how privileged we are to get to play the sport that we love and to do it at the level that we do as well. And I think, especially off the back of how far women's football has come, you know, it wasn't that long ago where women were banned from playing. And the fact that we even have a place on the pitch and now we have a global audience as well, I think we feel a really strong responsibility to lead and to push the game forward in a direction where we want it to go. And I think we didn't just get this platform to sit by idly and let the game go in a direction that doesn't benefit future players, but also future people and the planet as a whole. And I think, yeah, as everybody has alluded to here today, that sport has such a huge potential to do the right things, and FIFA and football in general, like, wow, what a possibility we have to lead the way and to show what's possible. And the sponsorship deal just simply isn't it. It really isn't. So really proud to be one of the women standing tall and saying, this isn't us, this isn't the direction that we want to head in, and please reconsider.
Thank you. It's really motivating to hear that. And I know we're ending on a slightly spikier note, but within this process, we're trying to now transition away from fossil fuels. That's what has been agreed under this process. And surely if we're going to do that, we also need to transition away from fossil fuels in sports, which strikes me as a huge anomaly. So very, very inspired by the work that you, Sophie, and others are doing. I want to say an enormous thank you to our speakers who have come so far. So to Pragnia, David, Katie, Sophie, Aroni, and Sam, thank you so much. I think a big hand for all of them today. That concludes our amazing session. I think we can all agree that sports has an enormous capacity to inspire a radical paradigm shift in terms of climate action because of the way that it can involve and engage fans, but also reduce its own impact, including through, of course, Scope 3 emissions. I want to thank the panelists on the first panel who took us through all of the changes that they're making in their organizations. I want to thank those that came into the second panel to talk about systems transformation and how policy advocacy can dynamically drive climate action in sport. And then finally, obviously, we've heard very inspirationally from the athletes themselves. Thank you so much. Thank you to Lindita, Sports for Climate Action and UN Climate Change for hosting us all. And thank you so much for coming. Cheers.